Hey, everybody, welcome back to the channel. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and today we'll be talking about classic James Bond. But before we get into that, smash that like button, make sure you're still subscribed, ring the bell, and leave us a comment. We've got a great community here, and it's all thanks to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. With all that said, let's dive in. Prologue to this one takes place in 1962 when the station chief of MI6 in Jamaica is murdered, along with his secretary, by a trio of assassins. When news of his death reaches M, the head of MI6, he assigns James Bond to investigate the matter and determine if it is related to the station chief's cooperation with the CIA on a case involving the disruption of rocket launches from Cape Canaveral by radio jamming. And that brings us to the main plot of this game session. James Bond arrives in Jamaica and is approached by a man claiming to be his chauffeur. Bond makes a perception check, which allows him to figure out that this man is really an enemy agent sent to kill him. So Bond quietly kills the enemy agent, then goes to the home of the station chief, where he runs into a CIA agent named Felix Leiter, who is also investigating the station chief's death. Bond learns from Felix that the CIA traced the radio jamming signal to Jamaica, which was a British colony until 1962, and that the station chief was helping to pinpoint its exact origin. It is revealed that before the station chief died, he collected mineral samples from an island called Crab Key, where people are forbidden to go. Bond suspects that the radio jamming was coming from Crab Key, and so he persuades Felix to take him out there. The following day, after arriving, Bond and Felix meet a beautiful blonde haired woman named Honey Rider, who is a shell diver. When armed guards arrive in a boat, Bond and Felix take Rider with them and escape into a swamp. At nightfall, the group encounters a flame tank disguised as a dragon to deter locals. Bond and Felix are captured and taken to a hidden base. Once they are inside of this expansive headquarters, they are swiftly put into decontamination due to the swamp being contaminated with radioactivity. After being led to private quarters set up for them, the player characters are then escorted to dine with the base's owner, Dr. Julius No, criminal scientist who has prosthetic metal hands due to radiation exposure. Bond learns that Dr. No was a former member of a Chinese crime organization until he stole $10 million in gold. And now he works for a secret organization known as Spectre, which stands for Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Extortion. The radio jamming being conducted by No is being planned to disrupt the Project Mercury space launch at Cape Canaveral using a radio beam, which he states will be a demonstration of Spectre's power. When Bond refuses to join Spectre, No has Ryder taken away and Bond beaten and imprisoned. However, Bond pretends to be ill, and when a guard comes in to check on him, he fights the guard, knocking him out, then trading clothing with the man. Bond then infiltrates the base's control center, where he discovers that the radio beam being prepared to disrupt the launch is powered by a nuclear reactor, so Bond overloads it. Dr. No attempts to stop him, but Bond shoots and kills him. As the base's personnel evacuate, Bond frees Honey Rider before they escape the island by boat, moments before the base is destroyed. Nick Fury then finds James Bond, Honey Rider, and Felix Leiter adrift at sea after their boat ran out of fuel, and they have them towed to safety on board a Shield aircraft carrier. James Bond and Honey Ryder are taken to private quarters where Ryder asks what they'll do to kill the time until they reach port, and Bond hangs a sock on the doorknob, then shuts and locks the door to their room. And that was it. That was our version of Dr. No. We started out just like the movie did, but the players were unfamiliar enough with the film that here and there they made different choices. Interestingly enough, though, at the end of the day, we sort of end up with the same results that they had at the end of the movie. We just got there differently, which I think is kind of cool myself. I actually was inspired to run this game after I binged a season of Venture Brothers, which, for anyone unfamiliar with that cartoon, it often features lots of retro futuristic stuff from the 1960s. Anyways, so that got me thinking about how much I liked the kinds of expansive headquarters that the Bond villains always seem to have, as well as the weird look of their gadgets and furniture and all that stuff. So our first idea was to do a parody in the vein of Austin Powers or Get Smart. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like we should just play it straight, partially because I'd never actually ran a serious 1960s spy game, and also because, in my humble opinion, comedy is really hard to do right, especially if in a role playing game you set out to be funny from the get go. I find that those games are usually the ones that are the most eye rolling and annoying. More often than not, the jokes fall flat and just irritate the players rather than entertain them. So I ran this first adventure as a sort of proof of concept, and I felt like it went really well. I found some James Bond music, not the theme song, but rather the more kind of like quiet, jazzy stuff that they used to play when Bond was snooping around or chatting up some beautiful woman or, that kind of thing. And I had a bunch of Post-it notes that I filled with weird stuff that I would see when I watched a bunch of Bond movies for research, writing down any sort of like physical object that they don't make anymore. I found that defunct name brands in particular seem to be a great way to get my players into that headspace, that this was kind of another world that no longer exists. Likewise, I mined the TV show Mad Men for more ideas. So one of the subtle things that I did was I basically had everybody smoking all of the time. And again, not in a jokey way, right? But more like a PC would ask an NPC a question, and I would have the NPC be compliant, but maybe ask for a light or offer them a cigarette, that sort of thing. I also tried a lot harder than usual to remember to use adjectives. Personally, I have a really bad habit of being like all function and no form. In other words, I get into this rut of only telling the players the bare bones of what they need to know. And that's partially me being lazy. And it's partially that we've been playing together for so long that on some level, my players can anticipate me and they sort of know what I'm thinking or what I'm going for. So I genuinely don't need to describe much most of the time because they're already on my wavelength. But with this one, I felt like there were a lot of visuals that I really wanted to put into their heads, and I think it worked. I remember at one point saying the villain's lair was a brand new construction, and one of the players, it was my friend's girlfriend, she said, "I forgot new carpet had a smell to it." And I thought it was really cool that I never mentioned that, right? But I described it enough, and she was so in the zone that she could imagine what the place would smell like. And in my opinion, that's when gaming is the best, you know? Something else that I did that we really liked was I came up with random encounter tables based on James Bond tropes. So, for instance, one just said evil ski resort, which might be confusing or funny depending on how you look at it. But the idea would be that if I rolled up evil ski resort, then Bond would get some clue that someone involved in what he was looking into owned a ski resort. So he'd go there, snoop around, and find the next clue. But invariably in the process, someone would detect him doing this and chase him. And that chase would end up with both of them skiing down a mountain with the bad guys shooting at Bond as they ski. So if you've seen old Bond movies, you've probably seen this trope, right? They do it more than once. And I felt like it was famous enough that it resonated with my players. So again, it was putting images into their heads, but it was also sort of writing the game for me. Um, I had encounters that would start an adventure with tropes like stolen nuke or evil space station. And I had encounter tables for the end of an adventure, like underwater lair or volcano lair, that sort of thing. I even had tables for henchmen that would say things like normal guy, but shorter, or normal guy, but with a metal body part. So examples of that would be like Jaws, right? And for a while, it was very, very cool. But the problem was that there are kind of only so many Bond tropes. And after several game sessions, like, I don't know, we maybe did like 10, and they started to overlap, right? We were starting to hit the same tropes over and over again. And the players kind of lost interest. So we went back to a normal superhero game. But there for a while, our 1960s spy stuff was a lot of fun. Hopefully you liked hearing about it. If so, as always, smash that like button. Make sure you're still subscribed. Ring the bell so you know when we upload more content. And leave us a comment because that helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. From all of us here at The Longest Game, we hope that you guys have a great week, and we will see you in the next adventure. Bye.